Picture the scene. Two samurai face each other in a silent courtyard. The morning sun catches the edge of polished steel, a blade glinting like fire. Onlookers watch in absolute silence. You expect a clash of swords, a storm of strikes and parries, a battle of endurance and skill, like something from a Kurosawa epic or a modern anime. But the reality? Very different. Most samurai duels were over in a heartbeat. A single movement, one draw of the sword, and then silence. These weren't theatrical fights meant to impress an audience. They were matters of life and death. Raw, brutal moments where honor and survival balanced on the edge of a blade. To the samurai, every duel carried immense weight. The outcome didn't just decide who lived or died. It could elevate a family, destroy a clan, or rewrite a warrior's reputation for generations. So why did they happen? What rules shaped them? And why do we still talk about them centuries later? This isn't the duel you've seen in movies. This is what really happened when two samurai crossed blades. Welcome to Japan Rewind. Here, we explore the untold stories of Japan's past. Stories where history and myth collide, and reality is often stranger than legend. Today's episode, the truth behind the samurai duel. Myth versus reality. When most of us picture a samurai duel, we imagine a scene drawn from cinema or anime. Two warriors pacing in circles, blades flashing in the sunlight, a furious storm of strikes and counters. The fight drags on, minute after minute, until one fighter collapses in exhaustion or triumph. But the truth preserved in historical records is far less theatrical and far more chilling. Duels were usually short, brutal, and final. The entire exchange might last no more than a few seconds. Samurai trained for years not to prolong combat, but to end it instantly. Techniques like iaijutsu, drawing and cutting in a single motion, were designed with one purpose: to kill before an opponent could even react. What often lasted longer than the fight itself was the silence before it. Eyewitness accounts describe two men standing motionless, each hand hovering near a sword hilt, bodies locked in tension for agonizing minutes. To onlookers, it was unbearable suspense. To the samurai, it was psychological warfare. Each warrior waited for the faintest flicker of hesitation. And when one finally moved, the outcome was decided in an instant. One Edo period diary describes a duel so fast that witnesses argued afterward about who had struck. Only when one samurai staggered and collapsed did the truth become clear. Another account mentions a fight over within the time it took a cicada to cry once. But why risk everything in a fight that could be over before the first breath? The answer lies in the world the samurai lived in. Why duels happened? Samurai duels were never sport. These weren't sparring matches or displays of bravado. They were serious, often deadly, and entered into only when the stakes were impossibly high. The most common reason was honor. In samurai society, honor was everything. A reputation could be a warrior's most valuable weapon. An insult, whether spoken in public or whispered in private, couldn't be ignored. To let it pass unchallenged meant permanent shame. Others dueled because of politics. Rival samurai families competed for influence at court or within their clan. Sometimes those rivalries spilled into duels, transforming political grudges into personal combat. Then there were the skill tests, known as kengi. These were duels fought to prove mastery, often between schools of swordsmanship. A victory could elevate a samurai's reputation, or an entire school's status. But even these tests were fraught with danger. Wooden practice swords could still break bones or kill outright, and steel blades turned any contest into a gamble with death. Sometimes, the duel ended before it began. One man's willingness to appear, to stare his opponent down without fear, was enough to force the other to retreat. A victory of spirit, won without steel. There's also the legal side. By the early Tokugawa era, dueling was technically banned. The shogunate sought to reduce violence and maintain order, but honor was stronger than law. Men still fought, knowing punishment might follow. Compare this to Europe, where nobles fought rapier or pistol duels in defiance of royal decrees. In both cultures, the call of honor often outweighed the threat of punishment. And when honor and reputation were on the line, the duel was more than combat. It became ritual. Rules and rituals. Not every duel was a sudden clash in the street. Many were carefully arranged, surrounded by ceremony. These duels resembled trials, with rules, witnesses, and grim expectations. Both warriors were often accompanied by a second, much like European duelists centuries later. This trusted companion might act as a mediator, bear witness, or deliver final words home if the samurai fell. The presence of witnesses ensured the duel's outcome was beyond dispute, recorded for history and for the clan. Rituals mattered too. Some samurai composed death poems before battle, short striking verses about impermanence, mortality, or the fleeting beauty of life. These poems were considered the final proof of a warrior's composure. Even facing death, he displayed clarity of mind. Clothing reflected the duel's purpose. Armor was rarely worn. Instead, samurai stripped down to light robes, eliminating any hindrance to speed and precision. This wasn't about endurance. It was about one strike, clean and final. Then came the silence. Accounts describe warriors locked in stillness, eyes fixed, each heartbeat stretching into eternity. The pause wasn't hesitation. It was focus. And when the silence broke, it was with terrifying suddenness. A single flash of steel, the scream of a cut, and then silence again. But the duel wasn't defined only by ritual. It was shaped by the weapons, and the deadly art of using them. Weapons and fighting styles. The katana is the symbol most associated with the samurai, and by the Edo period, it had become the standard dueling weapon. Long, curved, and razor sharp, it was designed for speed and cutting power. Samurai carried it alongside the shorter wakizashi, a pairing known as the daisho, or big and small. But in a duel, it was the katana's reach and precision that decided most outcomes. Still, the blade alone didn't guarantee victory. Mastery mattered more than strength. Schools of swordsmanship, or ryu, taught philosophies of combat, where a single, perfectly timed strike was worth more than a storm of wasted cuts. Some schools emphasized iaijutsu, the art of killing with a single draw. Others trained warriors to read intent, to win by patience and psychological dominance. And not all duels involved steel. Wooden swords or bokken were sometimes used, but they were far from harmless. A well-placed strike with a bokken could fracture a skull or shatter ribs. The legendary Miyamoto Musashi famously carved a wooden oar into a weapon, using it to defeat Sasaki Kojiro. Occasionally, other weapons appeared. Spears, bows, even naginata. But whether with steel or wood, the principle was always the same: efficiency over display. And no one embodied that principle more than the most famous duelist in Japanese history. Famous duels and legacy: Miyamoto Musashi. His name still echoes through the centuries. Born in the late 1500s, Musashi became Japan's most legendary duelist. Records and legends claim he fought more than 60 duels, never tasting defeat. His most famous encounter was against Sasaki Kojiro, a skilled swordsman armed with a long blade nicknamed the Drying Pole. Kojiro was said to be tall, fast, and deadly. Yet Musashi turned the duel into a masterclass of psychological warfare. He arrived deliberately late, rowing across the water while carving a boat oar into a crude wooden sword. When the fight began, Musashi struck Kojiro down with a single blow. Fact and myth blur here. Some historians suggest Musashi manipulated his own legacy, while others argue later chroniclers exaggerated his deeds. But the essence remains. Musashi embodied the ruthless efficiency of the duel. He wasn't alone. The Yagyu clan, sword instructors to the Tokugawa shoguns, produced famous duelists of their own. Yagyu Munenori, a contemporary of Musashi, defeated rivals with what he called the life-giving sword, a style meant not just to kill, but to preserve harmony by ending fights swiftly. One recorded duel ended without blood, when Munenori's opponent, overwhelmed by his calm presence, dropped his sword before the first strike. Other encounters were quieter still. Some ended before a single strike, one warrior breaking under the unbearable pressure of silence. Others were fought in remote fields, witnessed by only a handful, but they shaped reputations that echoed through generations. Over time, the harsh reality, short, brutal, final, transformed into legend. Duels became symbols of artistry, philosophy, and discipline, rather than the messy gamble with death they truly were. So what really happened in a samurai duel? Far from the drawn-out battles of stage and screen, most duels were brief, decisive, and final. A single cut often decided not just a life, but a legacy. And yet, centuries later, we're still captivated by them. The silence before the strike, the courage to face death with calm resolve, the idea that in one moment of perfect focus, a man's fate could be sealed. Would you have lasted more than a few seconds in a duel? Drop your answer in the comments. If you enjoyed this dive into the realities behind the myth, subscribe to Japan Rewind for more untold stories from Japan's past. Until then, remember, history isn't just what happened, it's how people lived, fought, and dreamed.